What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you as usual Saturday morning. Thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody who hung out in the college football show last night. It was one of my better viewed college football shows. The college football show is the best viewed show. I don't know why that is. I mentioned it last night, but a lot of people hanging out in the chat. I thank you guys. I won't go into detail with college football now because that was what that show was for. I broke down a ton of games in that show, man. I went probably an hour and a half, hour, 40 minutes, broke down like everything. I'm on a 1 and 2 college football week so far, and I have 3 more college football plays. And just to reiterate what those are quickly, they are UConn plus 10.5, Northwestern plus 10, and Louisville minus 7.5. I think those are probably the best numbers you're going to be able to do on those. I haven't really looked at the market. I could share my screen, actually. We can look at the market here and just make sure that the market still looks to be indicating on those sides, because I don't even know, but I assume probably yes. Louisville still does have a higher cash percentage there. Northwestern still looking like they have the cash percentage as well. That one, probably 10.5 is actually out there right now, so I got to go look at that one, actually, because I've still just been waiting on that one because I didn't expect it to go down. And then Connecticut, that one looks like the best you can get now is 10. I got 10.5. They might still be out there, but I don't mind it. And the market still looks good on that too. But college football, if you want the college football analysis, go check that video out, man. I think those are good situational spots. I'm going to talk about a little bit of college basketball. I got 2 plays today. I'm just going to mention one of the biggest games today, just because Georgia happens to be undefeated, is Marquette, Georgia. That's one of the big games on the slate here, and it's right up at 11 a.m., so it's in less than an hour now in one of these tournaments, early season tournaments. We got a lot of tournaments going on, man. We got tournaments in Daytona Beach, Fort Myers. This one's in the Bahamas. I don't know what's going on in this tournament exactly, but Marquette is coming off a big win, man, which I think was at home against Purdue. I had Marquette in that game, so they are potentially in a letdown spot here, but maybe the fact that they're playing in this tournament and Georgia is undefeated is still going to have them focus coming into this game. I don't know. Georgia off to a good start, but they haven't really faced a difficult schedule so far, though I know North Florida has been playing pretty tough so far. I played Georgia in that game, actually, though, because it was a good spot to catch North Florida off of some bigger games. And then Georgia beat Georgia Tech on the road as well, which is a pretty decent win. But they're stepping up in class here against Marquette, man. I mean, I know Marquette doesn't have Kolek anymore, but this is still a well-rounded Marquette team, and that's why they're up from 5.5 to 6.5. Public with 75% of the tickets, because of course Marquette's going to be public. Even without Kolek there, they're the ranked team. I mean, they're undefeated as well. I think they're undefeated, right? They've been playing pretty well so far, and I mean, that's why the public's going to come in on them. The public doesn't really recognize Georgia as a name of basketball program at the very least. But yes, I believe both these teams are undefeated, but just the eye test from the public is going to say, oh, Marquette is the better team here. Which they are. The odds makers are telling you that. I don't want to get involved in this, but potentially it could be maybe a letdown spot for Marquette. So I would not want to lay the points with Marquette, even though they do have 87% of the cash as opposed to 75% of the tickets. So it does look like the market is kind of moving up on them a little bit. And then Cincinnati, Georgia Tech is the other ranked versus unranked matchup here that I kind of eyeballed quickly. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Cincinnati ranked 18th in the country. They're a pretty good program here, man, but they have not faced a difficult schedule so far. Their toughest game was their most recent one, which I guess was a road game at Northern Kentucky. They won this game, but Northern Kentucky is down probably this year. I mean, they're 0-4. They're usually a decent program in the conference that they're in, which I think they're in the horizon now, so they may start turning it around once conference play starts, but Cincinnati hasn't really been tested yet. This is going to be a second straight road game. So it does look a little bit difficult to me for Kentucky here, and the public's going to come in on them. They're ranked, they're undefeated, but again, like I said, they're not really battle-tested yet. They haven't really played anybody. Georgia Tech, at the very least, did play this North Florida team that's beating some good teams and Georgia, but that means they are coming off of a big game against Georgia, a big Georgia rivalry game, and they played them pretty tough, so does that mean they're going to be hung over coming into this game? I don't know, because Georgia did have a sizable lead for most of that game, actually. So once it got into the second half at all, the game was kind of over. So I don't know. The final score looks a little cosmetic, but Cincinnati's down from 8 to 7, 92% of the tickets, 100% of the cash. So they are going to be public, like I said. It looks like the line has dropped on them a little bit. The cash percentage I don't think is accurate. So just something to keep in mind. I'm not playing either of those games, though. I found some better situations I'll talk about a situation that I almost played. I'm only going to hit a few of these college basketball games. We're not in the full swing, like big college basketball Saturday slates yet, man. We're still in the early season, kind of weird, shortened Saturday slates here. Charleston Southern was a game that I did have my eye on, and my eye was on fading Charleston Southern. They're 1-5, but they have played a fairly difficult schedule. I mean, playing Clemson, that North Florida team that I mentioned that's beating everybody. Rio Grande Valley, Texas Rio Grande Valley looks pretty competitive, actually, with the way that they played against Wisconsin. And I won money on that one, even though Wisconsin was in a really bad spot. But that was a good game for RGV there. Not RGB, RGB, right? That's the hex color code. Yeah, red, green, and blue. What am I saying? I should know. I'm a software engineer. Yeah, that's what comes to my mind, but it's RGV, not RGB. And Charleston Southern is now coming off a game against LSU, where they went to LSU. I think this was at LSU. Yeah, it was in Baton Rouge on the road there, and LSU shot pretty poorly from three at 26.7%. They shot way better from the field, though. Charleston Southern had a terrible game from the field, 36.4%, but they don't seem to be a very good shooting team, man. I tried my hand with Charleston Southern in a spot that I thought was good not too long ago, and they got blasted, so they're not a very good team, so I would have no problem fading them in this game. They played LSU pretty close, man. I think LSU probably just didn't take them seriously, and that was a game where it was within 4 or 5 points in the final few minutes of the game. So Charleston Southern hung in that game as a 25.5 point underdog and covered, only losing by 9. So Charleston Southern coming off of this doesn't look like a great spot to me for them, even though they're playing a Furman team that's been pretty good recently. But look who they have up next, Georgia Tech and Miami. So this looks like a sandwich spot to me for Charleston Southern. I was close to pulling the trigger on Furman in this one, man. And my other spots are pretty similar, but Furman, I mean, they're undefeated. They haven't really played anybody yet. They are coming off an easy win over Oglethorpe, probably, right? Yeah, Oglethorpe. Emory and Oglethorpe, the twin universities in Atlanta, Georgia. There's who that is. I think Furman, I believe, is in South Carolina themselves. So the one thing about this is Charleston Southern still might be focused on this just because Furman is an in-state bigger brother to them, because Furman is in a better conference, and the way they've been playing recently, man. I mean, Charleston Southern, I don't think they're going to be unfocused. It's just a matter of, are they going to totally run out of steam after putting in a ton of effort against LSU, and that might be the case, as Furman has had a way easier time of it, but they haven't really been tested yet. And this is going to be only their second true road game, but I still like the Furman side here. I think Charleston Southern's in a bad spot. It's up from 8.5 to 9.5, or excuse me, to 9. Do I want to do this? Ken Baum has this line right around 8 or 9. I do think it's a bad spot for Charleston Southern, man. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. It's close. Do I want to add a third college basketball play here with Furman on the road here? Maybe. I mean, Charleston Southern's been really bad. And looking at Ken Baum, I don't want to show Ken Baum that much because I do pay for it. But Furman, Charleston Southern, I think Charleston Southern, yeah, neither of these teams play like a ridiculous tempo. So, like, they both play kind of a mid-pace type of game. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to add it. Fuck it. We're going to add Furman to the mix here. Furman -9 or whatever the case is. I put college football there. I meant college basketball. 3 college basketball plays, so we're up to 10 plays here today. Furman -9. That's going to be that play. I don't think there's anything else to say on that one, but that was my breakdown on that one. And let's go to my other 2 basketball games here that I have. The first one up is Kent State -1.5, or I think it's probably up to 2 now. So I think you are getting market agreement on all 3 of these games, so I will point that out. Oh, by the way, I'll point out really quickly, Stanford Santa Clara, this just looks like a really weird line with Stanford. They have flipped from a 1-point dog to going through pick'em, probably towards a 1-point favorite, but what recreational bettor is going to come in and see, oh, Stanford, I know who they are, against Santa Clara, and it's basically just pick the winner? Like, what gives with that line? 62% of the tickets on Stanford, 91% of the cash on Santa Clara. So the public is going to come in and look at this and think it looks pretty easy to take Stanford here, man. Actually, I'll break this down quickly just because I think this game is interesting. But I disagree with that, obviously. I mean, Stanford, they are... I would look the other way on this. When you see a strange line like this, it's usually indicating something. In Stanford, they have not faced a difficult schedule so far, but they are coming off a pretty bad performance against Norfolk State. That was a game I mentioned. I almost played Stanford because Norfolk State was actually not in a great spot, I think. in that game. Or no, I think I was thinking of a different game. I was thinking of the Grand Canyon game yesterday. What am I thinking of? Yeah, I played against Norfolk State off of the Stanford game. What am I talking about? Yeah. So Stanford played badly against Norfolk State in that game, and it's a 20-whatever point favorite, 20.5 point favorite, and only beat them by 7. Pretty bad performance from Stanford. But now this is their first true road game, and they do have Grand Canyon up next, so I'm not sure Stanford is really in the best spot, even though I have hesitation if I were to play this game. I hesitate a little bit just because Stanford is coming off a really lackluster performance, so they still might actually, that might cause them to focus and show up for this one, but difficult spot because it is a first true road game for them, and it is against an in-state little brother, and Santa Clara has faced a difficult schedule, man. I mean, they faced St. Louis when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was still playing there. I think he got injured in this game. I think that was their first game of the season. Yeah, so he played a majority of that game. So Santa Clara beat a full-strength St. Louis team. They only lost by Arizona State to 7. North Dakota State's not really that bad. Only lost by 8. And yeah, then they had their first true road game, and they got absolutely housed by Nevada. Nevada's pretty good, though, and really good at home as well. And then Santa Clara returned to form and beat UC Riverside. So the fact that they're 2-3 and Stanford is 5-0, the public's going to come in even more on Stanford for that reason. And so it looks way too easy to take Stanford. Santa Clara, that win over UC Riverside, I think that just puts them back in a winning mindset. I mean, they were a 9.5 point favorite. They should have won that game, which they did. So now going out on the road, or not going out on the road, staying at home, but having a win to break that losing momentum there, a nice bounce back win. I think they're going to have momentum coming into this. They'll be focused because they're facing an in-state bigger brother there in Stanford. So I would lean to the Santa Clara side. I just don't want to fade Stanford when they might be in a focus spot too, just because they didn't play well against Norfolk State. But still, the odds makers are telling you something here. With Stanford, they are the better team as they're laying 1 point on the road at Santa Clara, but the odds makers are telling you this is a lot closer than you think between these two teams. All right, Kent State, as I was going to say, Kent State, they're up from pick'em to 2. I don't see the percentages yet, but I agree with this. This is a fade of Cleveland State. Cleveland State is in one of those spots that I like to talk about, remember. They just played against Minnesota, and Minnesota's a grinding, pretty physical defense. Cleveland State was a 13.5 point underdog in this game at Minnesota. I think this is at Minnesota's home stadium, which is also not an easy place to play because the crowd is almost right on top of you. Minnesota really shot poorly, 20% from 3, 38.5% from the field. I mean, Cleveland State also shot really poorly, but Minnesota, I mean, they're not a great offensive team, but you don't expect them to be that bad from the floor. In Minnesota, they play a defensive game, which was going to keep Cleveland State kind of hanging around in this game, and they did. They were within 4 points, I think less than that. They were within, 3 or 4 points in the final few minutes of the game. So Cleveland State had shots to beat Minnesota here, and then they wound up losing by 11, but the game was definitely closer than that down the stretch. So Cleveland State coming off of this game, I don't think they're in a very good spot, man. They don't have a bigger game up next, and yes, Kent State might be considered to be a bigger brother of theirs in state because these are both Ohio teams, but coming off a brutal game like that, I'm not sure, man. Even though I know Cleveland State's kind of battle-tested. They played Michigan and Kansas State already, but this just looks like a bad spot coming off that physical defense. And Kent State is a good team, man. Cleveland State's been decent in the horizon. Kent State's been one of the better teams in the MAC recently. And look at what Kent State has done. I mean, they played Louisiana. I mean, that's not a really easy game either. And then they lost to Auburn on the road. I mean, obviously, that's not an easy game at all. Auburn's one of the best teams in the country. And Kent State at least played pretty respectably in that game. But that was a big game. And coming off of that, I think that explains why Kent State didn't have a good game against Niagara. Although this game was actually better than it looks. Kent State, I think, just kind of ran out of steam here because they were coming off that big Auburn game. I don't think they had that much left in the tank. And they were a huge favorite here, 13.5 points, and they almost got caught by Niagara. So I think that's going to refocus Kent State. But Kent State was blowing them out of the building in this game too, though, man, at home. And then Kent State let up, and Niagara got back into the game and almost caught up. So I think that's going to scare Kent State a little bit into refocus here. I expect Kent State to bounce back and be focused here. I mean, that was a game where they played a lot better than the final score looks to, and they didn't shoot particularly well. Niagara, 40.9% from 3 is kind of an outlier. I mean, Kent State dominated the boards against them at the very least, so they did outplay them in the game. That 3-point shooting percentage from Niagara was kind of an unsustainable high there, so give me Kent State. And as far as the tempo is concerned here, I mean, Kent State, they play a really slow tempo, and Cleveland State plays up a little bit more up tempo, I think, right? Not too much, actually. They still play kind of slow too, but Kent State's going to want to slow the game down even more. So Cleveland State's going to kind of run into like back-to-back physical teams here who are a little bit better than they are. Minnesota significantly better than they are, and Kent State a little bit better than they are, as the odds makers are telling you, because Kent State is favored on the road in this one. But I don't think the public thinks any differently. I mean, Cleveland State, I think, is 3-3, and Kent State is 3-1. So the public is not going to really think that Cleveland State's the better team here. But this is just a spot play. I don't think public is really going to come in and look at this game very much. So Kent State -1.5, or it might be -2 out there now. But that's another play. And then to finish college basketball, similar spot, St. Mary's -21. They're up from 20 to 21. They are a little bit public, 67% of the tickets and cash. But I think this is a spot where, even though I know this is an in-state little brother again in Cal Poly, I think Cal Poly is going to run out of steam. I mean, look at what they've done. They've definitely played pretty well this season, man. I mean, they played San Francisco and Cal on the road. This Cal Poly team looks fairly dangerous this year. I mean, those are both pretty respectable losses there. And then they beat Seattle. Seattle's not bad either. They went into Eastern Washington. I faded Eastern Washington in that game. I won on Cal Poly in that game. So at least you can explain that as being a bad spot for Eastern Washington. But Cal Poly basically wire to wire won that game. Eastern Washington climbed back into the game. But Cal Poly had a big lead in that game. They outplayed Eastern Washington. That was a good game for them. They were blowing them out of their own building, basically. Although Cal Poly did shoot a little bit high from the field there, 51.6, kind of an outlier. And then they came off of that, another big game, 16.5-point underdog at Arizona State, and they didn't go away in this game, and they played basically right into the wire in this game against Arizona State. They were in the game in the final minute of the game, man, still behind by like one score late in the game, so they did not go away in this game. Cal Poly, what are they going to really have left after that, man? I know they're playing another step-up game here, but it's a third straight road game off of multiple big performances as a road underdog. I just don't see it. I just think they're going to get caught here. This St. Mary's team is very, very good. And St. Mary's, I mean, they're coming off an easy win over Stanislaus. I was going to guess it was Stanislaus State, whatever. But St. Mary's, I mean, that's just kind of a momentum continuing win, a nice way to win after they played a tougher game against Nebraska. This is just kind of a nice momentum continuing win. Yes, they do have a bigger game against USC up next, but it's not the Bronny James USC anymore at the very least. I just expect Cal Poly to get caught here. And my one caveat here is that St. Mary's plays a very slow pace, one of the slowest paces in the country. I don't know where they're at here, but let me see. Maybe Ken Palm, he doesn't abbreviate them. 351st out of 360, whatever, in tempo. So St. Mary's, very good team, but they're very efficient offensively. So even though they play really slow tempo, they can still score. So I like that. Ken Palm, by the way, I think has Cleveland State winning their game by 1, but it's kind of just like a toss-up line. I think he has this game around 20. I don't really want to show it because I recommend that you pay for his site just because he puts in a lot of work. His stuff is really good, man. It's the best power ranking site really in any sport that has ever been out there, in my opinion. So Ken Palm, I mean, it's only like $20 a month or something, or 30 maybe at this point. Or not a month, that would be insane. A year. So it's actually really pretty inexpensive if you want, even if you're not a bettor. I mean, if you just want extra information and stuff, it's not really a huge price there. And you get to support a guy who's good at what he does. But yeah, St. Mary's. The thing is, they play slow, but yes, they have a very efficient offense. And Cal Poly, they play a really fast tempo, 14th in the country. So them having to be way slowed down like this against the St. Mary's team that's going to really just grind them down in a spot where they're already maybe pretty tired off of a couple of step-up games. Yeah, I just think they're going to run out of gas here. I'm going to lay the points with St. Mary's. That's a big tempo collision there where if St. Mary's plays their style of game, it's going to be pretty uncomfortable for Cal Poly in that one. I know, like I said, a slow-paced team covering huge numbers, a little dangerous, but laying big numbers in basketball is a little bit better to do than in football a lot of times because more points are scored in basketball than in football. So it's more of the equivalent of like maybe like a 2-touchdown spread that you're laying here in this one. So St. Mary's is that play. Scott, what's up, my man? Let's go over to We'll go to NHL. I have a lot to say in the NHL. I mean, the Saturday card is always stacked, man. And then I'll finish with NBA because people like NBA more probably, but I only have one play in the NBA. I'm just going to run down the NHL the way that I looked at it. And I have plays in 3 of the first 4 games here and then didn't play any of the other games on the slate, but I will comment on a lot of these. First play up is going to be a fade spot of the Chicago Blackhawks here. I'm going to lay a price with the Philadelphia Flyers at minus 154. You could split it at minus 1.5 puck line and plus 1.5, minus 1.5 at plus money on the puck line with half the bet, and then the minus 154 money line for the other half of the bet. But in hockey, sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't want to. In a game like this, I don't know, man. Philly, they're just kind of an ugly team, so I just kind of want to play them just win the game outright here. And this is just a bad spot for Chicago, man. Chicago, they're coming off a huge win over the Florida Panthers. They just beat the returning champs, and now they go out on the road for this one single game where they have to go to the East Coast, and then they come back home a couple days off, and they play Dallas and Minnesota, and those are much bigger games too. And Chicago's in the Western Conference still, I believe, right? So Chicago, an out-of-conference road game like this is not necessarily a game where they're really going to show focus, especially off of beating Florida and then playing a struggling Philadelphia team. And then those next 2 games are both divisional games against Dallas and Minnesota, I'm pretty sure. So I think it's a bad spot for them. I think they're in a letdown. It's this weird single-game travel spot over to Philadelphia, who's a below 500 team. It's been playing some ugly hockey, but they've been playing decently recently. Hey, I rhymed. I'm a poet. But I like the spot for Philly more, even though, yes, they're coming off a tough game against Carolina, but they got blown out in this game. I mean, they didn't really hang around in this game, I don't think. Well, they were losing by 1 in the third period, actually, but they were losing by 3 goals still pretty early in the third period, so they were losing 4-1 for like 14 minutes of game time, so they were out of that game. It did not go to the wire, and now they have 2 days off, so they're coming off 2 losses, but they're to Colorado and Carolina, so I mean, you can't really fault them for losing to 2 good teams like that. And they're staying at home, and they want to turn this thing around, I think, man. I think having the extra time off here is going to help them break that losing momentum, kind of forget about that. They're going to focus on Chicago here, in my opinion. So I like Philadelphia in this game, even though on the surface you think maybe this is a sandwich spot between Carolina and Vegas. I don't think so, because they lost pretty badly in that game, and I think this disrupts the losing momentum that they have. So I'm going to take Philly in this game. And like I said, they've been playing a little bit better. They're the more rested team here. They know how to win games now and compete at the very least. It's a much worse spot for Chicago, in my opinion. The market, I think, is disagreeing with me on this one, though. Let me see. Philadelphia's down from minus 155 to minus 148, with Chicago 50% of tickets and 82% of the cash. So a lot of market disagreement on this one with me, but so be it. I mean, I don't like fading the market that much, but this just looks like a pretty bad spot, a sandwich spot for Chicago. So I'm doing it. I'm playing the game. Philadelphia, minus 154 money line. And hopefully I don't get caught there, because that's an expensive money line to lay. Next up, Minnesota, Calgary. Minnesota's down from minus 140 to minus 138. 50% of the tickets evenly split, but 91% of the cash on Calgary. So a lot of market indicators on, on the Calgary side. Yes, that is true. I looked at this and I said, holy crap, Minnesota's in a terrible spot. I want to fade Minnesota here. But then I looked, and Calgary is also in a bad spot. So you know what I do. I can't help myself when I play some of these games. I'm going to play this game over 5.5 at minus 114. And the market does look like it's slightly disagreeing, even though it's up from 5.5 juiced minus 115 to minus 120 here on the over. So the line has moved up a little bit, but 50% of the tickets and 61% of the cash on the under. And again, I'm just going to disagree with it and hope that my over reads still continue to come through, man, because I know I'm 2-3 in actually betting them, but I was getting a lot of them right on these leans. But Minnesota, yeah, they're no doubt they're in a terrible spot. They just beat the conference champs from last year, Edmonton. Now they have to go step down in class and face Calgary. And up next in 2 days, they got Winnipeg, who's got, like, I think, the best record in hockey still. It might be the best team in hockey. So Minnesota easily could overlook Calgary in this spot. Yeah, it's a bad spot for Minnesota here. And then I go and I look at Calgary. I'm thinking, oh, sweet, I'm going to play Calgary here. Oh, crap, they just beat the New York Rangers. So I think they're in a letdown spot too, man. I mean, that's a big game to come off of. Yes, the spot for Minnesota is worse, so I would still agree with, I would still, if you want to play the side, I would still play Calgary at plus on the money line there. But I think that these two teams are coming off such big wins like this that I think their defense is going to be affected the most. The defensive intensity tends to be affected the most here. And I mean, as far as goalies are concerned, yeah, Minnesota's goalie is pretty good. And Gustafsson, I think he is going to play in this game. But some maybe goaltending questions on Calgary, even though I know they've played a lot of low-scoring games. They play some slower-paced games here, which is why this total is low. But I think you're just going to get more value on this one. I'm going to play it to go over with both teams being in bad spots. And the last one up is Colorado, Florida. It's a big game, and I'm playing this one too. Colorado plus 105 on the money line. Florida's down from minus 140 to minus 123. So, hey, a market agreeing with me on this one. 50% of tickets evenly split and 74% of the cash on the Colorado side. So it looks like there is some strong money coming in, pushing this line towards Colorado. I agree with it. I mean, the public is mostly going to be coming in on the Florida side, in my opinion, even though it looks like the tickets are evenly split or whatever I just said here. Man, look at this. Florida, they're the returning champs. They're at home. They have the better record. So people are going to come in. Public is going to come in and think, oh, this is a pretty cheap price here on Florida. Give me Florida. I'm going to push back on that. I mean, Florida has started losing some games. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. Granted that 3 of those 4 losses were to the Devils and Winnipeg, and those teams are good. The Jets. Finally, a Jets team that doesn't suck. There you go. So you can't blame them for that. And then you can kind of explain the Chicago loss too, because Florida losing to Chicago, I mean, that was just kind of a hangover spot where they were hung over coming off that Winnipeg game. So they probably were just kind of unfocused, haven't played a bunch of step-up games in a row. So you might say, Toad, well, doesn't that mean they're going to be in a bounce-back spot? They just lost to an inferior team in Colorado, or in Chicago. I mean, yeah, they did. But they're returning home from a road trip now. So that's a bad spot. I mean, they went all the way up to Winnipeg, even though they were only gone for a couple days. That's still a road trip that takes them a far distance. They're returning home now. You got home life to get back to. And look what they have up next on Monday. Washington, who's now ahead of them in the conference standings. That's a conference matchup. That's a bigger game, in my opinion, man, than this Colorado team is good, but flying under the radar right now. So they might not grab as much attention from some of these opponents right now because Colorado flying under the radar right now, man. Colorado, they're better than what their record would indicate. They're dealing with some injuries, but they're definitely a formidable opponent here. And Colorado, yeah, they're coming off beating Washington, so it's like, is that going to be a letdown spot? Well, I mean, are you really going to be in a letdown spot and be unfocused when you're facing the returning champs, the Florida Panthers? I don't think so. I think this game is bigger for Colorado here, so give me the Colorado Avalanche in that one as well. Fading Florida in the return home spot, although I know it's not a long road trip, but give me that one anyway, and then I'll talk about some of these other games. So a lot of interesting games in hockey, man. In Montreal, they're kind of in a bad spot, in my opinion, because they're coming off beating Edmonton. Edmonton losing a lot of games recently, man. But are they going to be totally unfocused with a bunch of days off and then playing Vegas? I don't know. But having 1-2 games and going into extra days off on a high note like that, that could hurt Montreal's momentum too, man. So I don't know. But the extra rest at least gives them rest. It means Montembeault is probably going to be in net again here because of all the extra rest there. But I think it could be a letdown spot for them. And that time off could disrupt their winning momentum a bit. Vegas, I mean, they're just continuing a road trip here. They're playing a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities, though. So that doesn't look great for Vegas either. But they're not really surrounding this game by big opponents, though. So I don't know if they're really going to overlook even a fairly bad Montreal team because Philadelphia up next is pretty ugly, too. So I don't know. So I think Vegas is actually in somewhat of the better spot there, but they're down from minus 175 to minus 161. 54% of tickets and 53% of cash. So the market indicators are certainly indicating against Vegas in that one, so I'm not going to play it, obviously. But that's just what we got going on there. Dallas and Tampa. I don't know if I wanted to talk about the Bruins game. I don't know if there's really much of a situation there, but I'm not even really sure. Well, I will say Detroit returned home from a road trip, so they're in the 2nd game back from the road trip, but they didn't play that horribly in that road trip return where sometimes you're distracted, and maybe they were, but they still beat the Islanders, because you return home from a long road trip like that, sometimes you have to get back to family life. It distracts you, but they still won against the Islanders, but it is usually a positive spot having that 2nd straight home game. And the Bruins, I know they're coming off a win, which is a pretty big win in the fired coach spot there. They won for their new coach. So now going out on the road after that could be a little bit of a letdown spot for Boston. They're down from -135 to -133. 71% of tickets and 83% of cash on. So the public is still playing the Boston Bruins. I don't know why. As ugly as they've looked, Detroit, a little bit of an uglier record than even Boston has, though. But I don't know. But the odds makers are telling you Boston's the better team as they're the favorite on the road. And they are public, but they do have more of the cash on them. I'm not going to get involved in that one. Tampa Bay, this is a weird spot because they're returning home from a road trip, but it wasn't a long road trip. They're facing Dallas, who it's not like they're going to overlook Dallas, who's one of the best teams in hockey. And they're coming off a real ugly 7-6 loss, but that was without Vasilevsky in net. Johansson was in net there, so they're much better goalie, did not play in that game. I think they overlooked Columbus as well. Man, I think they had won that first game on the road trip, and I think they might have been looking ahead to Dallas a little bit. They got caught by Columbus. Columbus has been pulling off some upsets recently, man. So Tampa, even though it's a return home spot, I actually think it's a bounce-back spot for them in this game. And then on the Dallas side, Dallas is coming off beating San Jose. Now they're starting a road trip with a couple days off. They do have Carolina up next, but Tampa's been playing really well as well. When you start a road trip, that tends to be a focus spot as well. So I think both of these teams here are actually in spots where they're going to be focused. Dallas is up from -110 to -114 as a road favorite. I don't see the percentages yet, but it looks like the public ticket percentage might be coming in, taking the moneyline underdog Dallas Stars. I don't know if I necessarily agree, or excuse me, the moneyline underdog Tampa Bay Lightning there. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that or not, but it's just another interesting game to point out. A lot of these games are interesting, man. I mean, New Jersey, Washington. Was this game interesting? Yeah, so New Jersey's coming off beating Carolina. So is that going to be a letdown spot? Now they have this one game where they have to go down to Washington. I don't know that they're really going to overlook Washington, though, because Washington has been very good as well in the Eastern Conference. So that's another, I think it's a divisional foe for New Jersey. So even though they're coming off a huge win, I don't necessarily think they're going to overlook Washington either. Washington, they're coming off a loss, so they are still in probably the better spot here. Washington, they return home from a road trip. So, I always say that's a tough spot, returning home from a road trip. Getting back to home life tends to distract you. They lost to the Colorado Avalanche, and maybe they were even looking ahead. I think I played this game, right? I think I did. I forget. Did I play this game? I played on the Avalanche at one point. I think I did. I think I played on the Avs in this game, so that was a win for me. I faded Washington in a bad spot. Part of that handicap was I thought Washington might even actually look ahead to this big divisional game against New Jersey. I think they were, and they do have Florida up next, but I don't think they're going to overlook New Jersey. So I think both these teams are not going to overlook their opponents, but I like the spot for Washington better because I think New Jersey may run out of gas a little bit after beating Carolina. I mean, you got to put in big effort, multiple games in a row like that, whereas Washington is in a much more positive scheduling spot there. New Jersey up from -130 to -134. So the odds makers, though, this is interesting. The odds makers are actually telling you New Jersey is the better team as they are laying a price on the road, even though Washington has been better. Washington does have a slightly better record. That's interesting. So I think the public's going to come in and think that it looks maybe kind of easy to take Washington here. But in this case, if the public is on Washington, I agree with them. But I don't think they actually are in this game. Washington is 7-3-1 at home. Devils 8-4-0 on the road. So Devils have not played badly on the road either. But so this is kind of this is a big game, man, between two teams that might be focused, two teams that play pretty well in these environments. But I slightly lean to the Washington side because of the scheduling spot there in that one. New Jersey up from -130 to -134 with 83% of the tickets on them, but 59% of the cash on the other side on Washington. So the public is actually on the New Jersey side in that one. Interesting, which is weird. I wouldn't expect that because the line looks really weird to be lining New Jersey as a favorite in a game like this, where the public is seemingly buying it and the money is actually maybe on the Washington side there. And I agree with the market read on that one then. In that case, I slightly agree with the Washington side there in that one. Winnipeg, Nashville. I don't know if I want to talk about every single one of these games, but do I want to talk about it? I don't even know. I could maybe skip it. Skip the pussy, obviously. Winnipeg, I mean, if they would overlook, they're in a bad scheduling spot, kind of, because it's just a back-to-back. So they did play yesterday, playing on the road, going down to Nashville, and they do have Minnesota up next in 2 days. So it is potentially a look ahead for Winnipeg. I'm not going to bank on it. I'm not going to get involved here. Nashville, I think, is a little bit of an underrated team, though. I think their record is not indicative of what they actually are. They've lost to some pretty solid opponents mixed in here. Haven't been that bad, but they're returning home from a road trip that took them out to the Pacific Northwest. So I don't want to play a team returning home from a road trip like that either, even though they are playing Winnipeg, and that is a team that you're certainly going to be focused on. But I'm not going to play Nashville in a return home spot. They are up from minus 123 to minus 125. 59% of the cash on them and 50% of the tickets evenly split there. So the market indicators do look like they're actually on the Nashville side, which is just kind of crazy to me. And then, did I want to talk about any of these other games? I don't know, because I was going through and I'm like, man. Oh, so Buffalo at Anaheim is already live right now. Is that right? That doesn't seem right. What? Why does it say live? That was last night, wasn't it? I don't know what I'm even looking at. Yeah, because they're playing San Jose tonight. So I don't know. So Buffalo is in a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, and they have Minnesota up next. So possible they overlook San Jose here, and they're coming off an overtime game last night as well. Like I said, they played late last night. San Jose had a day off at the very least, although they're returning home from a road trip, but only a 2-game road trip. So I don't want to play either of those teams. San Jose, a little bit more rested at the very least. Buffalo down from minus 160 to minus 148. So market indicators on the San Jose side, 54% of tickets on them. Somehow public ticket percentage slightly on San Jose. Who would have thought that would be the case? And 59% of the cash on San Jose. And then, of course, the late game here is a big game between the New York Rangers and the Edmonton Oilers. And I think both of these teams are going to be in bounce back mode here. I mean, I think they both got caught looking ahead to this game. The Rangers got caught by Calgary, lost to Calgary. I think they're going to be focused on this Edmonton team, man, because this could have been the Stanley Cup finals last year, potentially. In Edmonton, they lost to Minnesota, but that is a bigger game, losing to Minnesota, man. So they're playing 2 straight big games at the very least, but that was also a return home spot for Edmonton. And a lot of times when you don't play well in that first game returning home, you bounce back and play better in the second game. But I think, oh man, I think the Rangers are actually maybe in the slightly better spot to bounce back because Edmonton is coming off a much more difficult game against the Minnesota Wild, and the Rangers just lost to an inferior Calgary opponent. So I agree with the market indicators on this one slightly. Edmonton down from minus 130 to minus 123. 60% of the tickets and 75% of the cash on the New York Rangers. So it looks like public sentiment coming in and taking the Rangers, which of course the public would come in on them. I mean, Edmonton has been kind of underperforming. Their record is worse, and you're getting the team with a better record in the Rangers as an underdog. So it does look tempting for the public, but in this case, the public and the professional money look like they might be in agreement on this one, and I slightly agree with it, but not to an insane degree there. And that is the rundown of hockey, and then we'll talk NBA. Not a huge NBA slate today. I only have one play. Scott, thanks for hanging out, man. What does that acronym even mean? I don't even know. All right, let's talk about NBA here. I mean, I don't know what I even want to talk about with the NBA here. There were a few games that kind of caught my eye. I mean, the Knicks and the Jazz, kind of an interesting game. The Knicks are starting to turn it on and I think play like maybe we expect them to play. I mean, they had to adjust having Karl Anthony Towns in there, and, you know, I think they're finally gaining some chemistry here. I mean, they beat some bad teams, though, recently, but they finally got a good win over Phoenix, man. But Phoenix was without Durant, so keep that in mind. But that was still a nice win, beating Phoenix on the road. Now they're coming off that. They have to go into elevation and play Utah. Extra day off here, which might, if anything, actually disrupt their momentum a little bit. And then after Utah, they got Denver and Dallas. So this looks like a sandwich spot to me for the New York Knicks. So I would lean to the Jazz in this one. But the problem with the Jazz, other than the fact that the Jazz blew the game for me when I played them against San Antonio, I thought San Antonio was in a really bad spot there. Other than that fact, the Jazz are returning home from a road trip that they've been on for like a week. So I don't really want to play the Jazz in this spot either when it's a return home spot, even though they might be focused on a Knicks team. This Knicks team has been underperforming, and they have revenge against San Antonio up next, and then Denver and Dallas. So it is possible New York is not actually going to totally draw their focus there. I don't know. So I just don't want to get involved in the game. The Knicks are down from 9 to 8.5 with juice, 81% of tickets and 84% of the cash. So a difficult market read as well. It looks like the line has gone down a little bit. And the Knicks definitely public. I mean, that's not surprising, but more of the cash percentage on them is slightly surprising at the very least there. And then what else we got going on here? I don't know what else I was even going to talk about as far as these games. I don't know if some of these other games are really that interesting. Maybe a couple of them are. Portland, this is kind of I think this is a zigzag type of spot here. Portland, they played fairly tough against Oklahoma City on the road and lost by 10, and then they got crushed by Houston by almost 30 points in the next game. So now that was a game where they were double-digit underdogs to 11.5, but now this line is up even higher. I think it's like 12.5. Maybe it's going to go even higher than that with the Rockets at 70% of the tickets and 79% of the cash on the Rockets. I don't know how the cash percentage is on the Rockets here, man. Obviously, I understand why the Rockets are getting the public action because we just saw them blow out this Portland team, and it's like, what's going to change here? Well, I think the thing that can change here is that Portland was in kind of a bad spot there, and I think they're going to be embarrassed. They're getting at least one extra point here, so I expect Portland to play a better game here. When you have a zigzag spot like this, and these teams just played yesterday, and when that happens, the team that has all the adjustments to make is the team that got blown out. And if you were the team that blew the other team out, it's like, what do you have to adjust? You don't have anything to adjust because everything worked. So I expect kind of a zigzag here, and you're getting extra points, one extra point at least on the Portland side there. So that's the way I would lean, but I'm not going to play it. I mean, I would lean to taking the points with Portland, though, just because Houston just annihilated them. And up next, they do have Minnesota, and that's a much bigger game, too. So it looks like a zigzag with a potential look ahead there. So I would not lay the points with Houston in that one. Then Warriors Spurs. This game is actually interesting. Well, Charlotte-Milwaukee is actually slightly interesting, and only because Milwaukee, they're finally starting to play better, too. I mean, they're a little bit healthier. Giannis has stayed in the lineup recently. They were 2-7 at one point, 2-8 actually, and now they're 7-9, so they're on a nice run here. Although, granted, they beat mostly bad teams in there, but they're coming off a win over Indiana yesterday, so they're on a back-to-back, third game in 4 days, fourth game in 6 days, but it is all at home. So that mitigates it somewhat, the fact that they're not going to have to travel. But beating Indiana, you might think that doesn't look great because Indiana hasn't been playing well this year either. But that's a big game because Indiana eliminated Milwaukee from the playoffs last year. Man, you remember which team ended your season last year. First time you play them, you have that game circled. I kind of wanted to play Milwaukee in that one. Maybe I should have. That's a big win for Milwaukee. They got it done. They showed up for that game. They wanted it. So they could be in a little bit of a letdown spot, and they do have a superior opponent to Charlotte up next in Miami. Miami not playing that great, but still, it is still Miami with Jimmy Butler there and whatever. So it's possible Milwaukee does overlook Charlotte a little bit in this spot. And Charlotte playing a little bit better than we expected, I think, kind of flying under the radar. They face a pretty difficult schedule, too. So Charlotte team, maybe not really that bad. They're coming off an overtime win over Detroit, where Detroit was actually a road favorite in that game. Who would think? But I don't think that puts Charlotte in a particularly bad spot or anything like that. And they do have the day off at the very least. They have to go on this one-game road trip out to Milwaukee, which may serve to focus them, but I don't know. But I would lean to the Hornets side in that one slightly. The Bucks are down from 8.5 to 7.5. 61% of the tickets on the Bucks, 60% of the cash on the other side on the Charlotte Hornets. So market agreement, it looks like, on that one with the Charlotte Hornets. I do agree with it. I'm just not sure it's really the strongest play. And then Golden State at San Antonio here. The last game I'll talk about before my actual play, which is actually in the last game up. Golden State, they're in a third game in 4 days, fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. That's difficult, man. And they're bouncing all over the place, going from the Pacific Coast out to New Orleans, and they almost got caught. New Orleans played a nice game against them last night. But does that mean that Golden State's going to be in kind of a bounce-back spot now because a not very good New Orleans team kind of almost caught them? I don't know, maybe. So now Golden State, but it is a back-to-back. But they don't have any game up next that's bigger really either. So if you're going to fade Golden State here, it's really just about the rest spot here. And I don't know that I necessarily would want to do that. But the Spurs, they've been playing competitive basketball as well. They're coming off that win over Utah, where Utah at least gave them a scare and should have probably won that game. And San Antonio had a really big fourth quarter and busted my bet in that one. I thought that was a bad spot for San Antonio. So now I think that puts them in a more positive spot here. They should be focused on the Warriors, and the Warriors are down from 5 to 3. You'll have to look into see what injury issues are going on in this game. 80% of the tickets are on Washington, but 66% of the cash on the Spurs. So heavy market indicators on the Spurs. And I wouldn't disagree with it. Like I said, I think Golden State is in the worst spot, especially rest-wise. The thing to keep in mind is Wembanyama. He's been hurt for a few games now. So when I forgot to mention that when I played that San Antonio game, that was like their second or third game without Wemba. So he was out in that game, so he didn't play. And San Antonio still somehow played pretty well and beat Utah, even though that was another factor in that game, even though it was affecting the line a little bit. I thought that it would help Utah a little bit more that Wemba wasn't going to be in there. And San Antonio, it was not the injured player theory spot because Wemba had been out for a couple of games at that point. So San Antonio was kind of in one of those spots where they're not going to be able to like step up their game anymore without him. But now Wemba might come back in this game. It looks like he's a game time decision tonight, it looks like. So we don't know if he's going to come back or not. And maybe the odds makers are telling you he is, which is why the line is dropped like this. So if that's the case, I don't want to play the Spurs. I don't want to take a shorter number with the Spurs with their star player coming back because, again, they have to work him back into the lineup. They have to adjust. He has to adjust against that reverse injured player spot. You tend to not hit like the ground running right away. It tends to take a little while. So I'll just stay away from that. And the game I'm actually going to play does have market indication on it, even though it is public. I'm going to play the LA Lakers in this one against the Nuggets. Lakers up from 3.5 to 4.5. They got 69% of the tickets, 74% of the cash on the side of the Lakers. So it looks like the cash is coming in on the Lakers and driving the line up on them. And by the way, I forgot to mention what I did yesterday. I wound up with the win, 3-2 day yesterday. I was 2-2 in college basketball. One on Texas, barely, and one on Grand Canyon somewhat easily in those two games, and then lost badly on Virginia, and I think I lost badly on Arizona, too. I don't know what happened to Arizona last night, but the clincher, the rubber match got there for me with the Dallas Mavericks in the injured player spot on one side, plus the reverse injured player spot on the other side, where the Nuggets got Jokic back, and Dallas was the first game without Luka, and Dallas played really well. And they basically led almost wire to wire in that game. They had a huge lead in that game, let the entire lead slip, and then I turned around and they were actually losing the game. But they got it together, and they still not only covered, but won the game outright for me. So big win for me for Dallas. That was a winning night for me last night, man. Coming off a 5-1 Thursday. I had a winning Friday as well. So I'm doing pretty well right now. Again, I'm on the upswing again, so hopefully it continues. I don't want to have a horrible day and lose a ton of money here, man. Sometimes it happens when you're putting a lot at risk. I hope we at least get a slight win here today, man. Of course, that is obviously the hope, because I'm winning on the year again here, but it's still a little bit too close for comfort, even after that huge Thursday. But I'm in a decent position here. But yes, this game, before I get out of here, this is the last game I'm talking about. Denver, I mean, I just think they're in a bad spot. I know this is the second game back, the second game with Jokic back. He played really well last night, too, and they still lost the game. So he looked like he was basically at full strength last night. He wasn't injured. Like, I don't know why he was out. It was a personal absence. I don't know what it was, but he came back. It was his first game back, and the team didn't really play that well, but he played well. So, yeah, usually once they get that first game out of the way with him back, usually they do play better in that next game. But in this case, I don't really see it, man. They're on a back-to-back coming out of elevation off of a tough game against Dallas, against the team that won the Western Conference last year. First time they played them this year. That's a big game to come off of, man. And yeah, I know LeBron is going to draw your focus as well, but the Lakers, I think, are in a much better rest spot and bounce back spot as they had yesterday off. And that'll help them, I think, kind of recoup because they lost to Orlando, man. They lost to an Orlando team that the Lakers were probably like a 5-point favorite in this game or something around that. And I think the Lakers were looking ahead to Denver, man. I think they got caught. Maybe took Orlando a little bit for granted because Banchero is still out there, but Orlando's starting to play really good basketball right now, even without him. The one concern is that, yeah, that ended a big win streak for Los Angeles, and that win streak was not impressive. I mean, they did not beat any really great team in there. So I'm worried that this record is a little bit misleading on the LA Lakers here. But, I mean, LeBron, he's still playing well. I don't know what to tell you, man. And Dalton Connect looks like he's a nice piece there for them. He's got a nice piece, is what I'm saying. Gay for Connect, man. Connect 4, obviously. But I think LA is in a bounce-back spot here, man. I mean, they're still playing well, even though AD and LeBron are both old. They're still playing well. I think that even though this might disrupt their momentum because it did end their win streak, you're going to be focused when it's Denver coming into your place, man. Plus, I mean, probably they still remember Denver was the team Well, actually, wait, Denver, they eliminated Denver from the playoffs one of those years, didn't they? I don't even remember. Maybe not. Maybe Denver eliminated LA 2 years ago, whatever. I mean, it's all in the past anyway, but I think this is a better spot for the LA Lakers, so that is what I'm going to play. I think Denver in a tough spot on a back-to-back, having to come down and play a late Pacific Coast game, coming out of elevation off a tough physical game, whereas the Lakers are coming off a game they probably shouldn't have lost, and they got upset. So I think they're kind of in a bounce-back spot here. So give me the LA Lakers, and that's going to do it for me, man. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. Mostly Scott, because he's the only one chatting. Once again, all these plays today. College football, UConn plus 10.5. Northwestern, I think you can probably get plus 10.5 now. Louisville, minus 7.5. I didn't have UConn up for long enough. NBA, LA Lakers, minus 4, although I think it's mostly minus 4.5 now. College basketball, we got Furman, minus 9. Kent State, minus 1.5. I know all favorites in college basketball. St. Mary's, minus 21. And in hockey, the Philadelphia Flyers, minus 154. Minnesota Calgary, over 5.5 at minus 114. And Colorado Avalanche, plus 105. Saturday, stacked card, man, with all these sports being played and overlapping. It'll be one of the last ones that's this packed because college football is going to be ending, but that's the way it is. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Tower Gang Toad, of course. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. And you get live pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram. And I think that's it. That's going to do it for me, man. Go follow Tower Gang and enjoy the games. And the first basketball game, that Marquette game in the Bahamas, is up in like 7 minutes. Marquette, Georgia. Could be an interesting one. So let's have a good day, man. And peace out. Thanks, guys.